Hello ladies and gents, boys and girls, and welcome back to another banging Cup of TCG video. It's your boys, we return again, and we've got more Armory deck greatness coming at you live. Considering you guys loved the Bolton one, we thought, well, we'd get some dude who plays Dashing and do a quick one of those for the new Dio deck that's coming out. We are joined for the very first time by our lovely friend Noah. How you doing, man?
Hello, I'm good. A little bit tired after work. I had a nice long shift, but other than that, pretty good.
Of course, we've got the lovely Callum who's underneath me as well. We're going to dive headfirst into what is the newest Armory deck coming out that's probably going to have a pretty big stake in the meta coming up. It is the Dash.io Armory deck coming out on the 18th of October. Make sure you've got your pre-orders in with your LGS. Noah, one word answer off the bat. Is this Armory deck worth buying?
Yes.
Fantastic.
If you don't have
End the video, like, comment, and subscribe.
If you don't have any other cards at all, this is a really good product for you to pick up. It has lots of the items that you'll need, lots of actually the main deck cards of most Dash.io decks, and obviously 6 of the new cards. Three of which are probably the most broken card that we've seen come out since the book banning.
R.I.P.
Which I'm sure is a bit of a controversial take, but yeah, it's just really strong. It's got a few inefficiencies with the number of items in the deck, but the basis is actually very strong.
So you were talking about the new cards that we're getting in this one. While we're at the top of the screen, let's talk about the 4 new cards that we are getting, that being the equipment. Heavy Industry Gear Shift, a new piece of legs. How are we feeling about this one?
Very strong. The fact that it has 1 block allows you to block 6 power disruptive attacks. You go like a 3 block chest, boots, or you could just full armor block with your helm and your adaptive plating or something else, or your heavy industry ram stop or something. It allows you to disrupt those disruptive cards and just keep being aggressive. There's like no replacement for it, I would think. Some people prefer other cards, but I think it's really, really strong.
Brilliant. Heavy Industry Power Plant, Heavy Industry Ram Stop, and Heavy Industry Surveillance. There's a theme here, believe it or not. Are we as hot on these 3 as we are the Gear Shift?
Heavy Industry Power Plant, I think, is very, very strong into the fatigue decks and allows you to do max V more often and easier because you're able to boost your 0 cost to actually gain resources to be able to actually spend it, because that is one problem with Dash, is that sometimes you don't have enough resources to actually get it out, which is why
I've been there.
Techlo Foundry Heart is actually very strong. It allows you to find items and it gains you resources, but they'll come up later. The other 2, I don't think they're as good Dash.io cards. Ram Stop is okay. You don't really want to be pitching stuff on your opponent's turn, as well if there's not an item on top. And Heavy Industry Surveillance, again, is decent, does block decently well, but there are other, obviously, better options out there.
Notice that we have, like I say, 4 new equipment in this Armory deck, which is, I mean, far more than we've had in the previous one. Wait, hold on. The bottom one had 4 equipment.
So did
well, didn't it, right?
Yeah.
And the Azalea one. So it was just the KO one that got shortchanged, I guess, with
Don't get me started on shortchanging here with the Armory decks. Don't get me. There's a reason we didn't do an Azalea one, but
yeah. No, I think the Armory decks have been pretty consistently good so far. Say what you would about the Azalea one, but it's pretty cool for Dash.io to be getting 4 brand new equipment options.
Yeah, incredibly good budget options, right? I think that's the important thing here, that the Armory decks are great at getting people kind of in the door with certain classes and individual heroes as well. So these 4, great out the gate. Let's talk about a couple of the other new cards we're getting. Of course, Majestics being both reprinted and added in these Armory deck sets. We have the equipment at the top, and we have a new attack being Fast and Furious. A 0 for 3 boost doesn't seem that good, Noah, but maybe you can explain a little bit more.
Well, it's not really, most of the time, it is not a 0 for 3. It's a 0 for 4. A lot of the time, even if you don't really want to be drawing your items, but if you just play them out, it is a 0 for 4. And also you have a bit of a mind game when you're attacking. If they block 3 and you flash an item off the top, you get a real big gain. Like if you hit a boom grenade and it pumps it and it manages to hit, you've gained so much value from that.
I think you guys are skipping over, there's another bit of text on the card, right?
Nah.
Yeah, we are skipping over that part. This part is also very, very relevant with the new items and just in general. If the meta is a bit more blocky and you hit this off the top, it allows you to keep your items a bit longer, which is actually very, very useful. Like specifically into decks like maybe Florian, you might come across those that if you're playing in the current meta. Yeah, just being able to have that threat of the Boomerang for an extra turn, it can just like really, really swing games.
It's like Big Bertha, but for anything with Crank.
Yeah, I think as a player who often has to try and block boom grenades, I think you're happy to take a turn off and put your whole hand in front of certain Dio turns to try and stop the boom grenades. But I mean, you don't really want to be doing that every turn of the game, and this card makes that a little bit more difficult. Let's move on. As you mentioned, Noah, potentially quite a controversial card considering the great book burning of 2024. Cerebellum Processor. It's an item with Crank that enters the arena with 2 steam counters and gives you a once per turn action at the cost of 0 to draw a card. Give us the rundown on this. But Noah, this action to draw a card, it doesn't have go again.
Doesn't matter. Busted card. This in context of the deck, I mean, in specifically the Armory deck, it's more likely only going to draw you 1 card. Well, only draw you 1 card on the turn. You're not going to. It'll be quite hard to really maximize more than 1 within this deck unless you break your boots and you hit an item on that turn.
Yeah.
But this by itself and in multiples can allow for some nutty things in the deck going forward. And people have already found out. Much of they haven't played it in any tournaments yet, but from the sounds of it in the discords and the general sentiment towards this card, it's kind of busted.
Yeah, I think our sentiment to this card as a mech lover, let's go. As someone who's been on the receiving end of this, fuck this card. And I think Finley had the same sentiment the very first time we tested it when we were doing some early Rosetta testing. And Noah was just like, I'm going to play the new Armory deck stuff. And he's like, that would be pretty good. And then things got a little bit out of hand. And Finley vowed to never play against Noah again in testing. So that's always a good sign, isn't it? Yeah, really incredibly strong card. And we'll talk about some of the combinations that make this card busted when we move to our upgrade paths.
Just to sort of give a little bit more context, right? If you're not familiar with Dash.io's play patterns and what the deck is trying to do, why is a once per turn action to draw a card without go again? Why is that so powerful? How do you make real use of that?
Well, Dash.io allows you to look at the top of your deck at any time, and you can play an item that costs 0 or 1 off the top as though it was instant. That can be on either turn, preferably on your own turn, because most of the items you will play have Crank on them, and Crank allows you to. Most of the items come in with a counter, and it allows you to remove that counter and gain an action point. So you go up from 1 to 2, and then obviously if you have Cerebellum out, you can draw a card with that, and then go forward with the rest of your turn.
It's a free card.
Free card, basically.
As well as the free kind of card that you get when you have an item on the top of your deck.
Yeah, it allows you to have, in theory, like 6 card hands quite consistently. If you're not making more action points, also, like I said, if they stack, you can have more than that. Especially with another card like High Octane, you can have some of the biggest turns people have seen. It does have to break the chains. You have to be wary about armor and other things like
blocks,
that.
Yeah,
which are a bit of a problem for the deck, especially if you have to try and if your deck's attacks have to hit. Armor is a bit of a problem for Dash, so it's something to keep in mind.
There's certain cards in the deck which are incredibly hard to block, and they've actually given them to us inside of the Armory deck. One of the most notable ones being the reprinted Majestic, that of Maximum Velocity, a 2-cost 10 attack card, which on paper seems busted, and when you actually fulfill its text of boosting 3 or more times in a turn, does feel busted as well, especially when you're going to 6-card hands once we look at some of the combinations you can do with Cerebellum Processor, right?
Yeah, like this card has been in and out of people's lists. I know Mara Faris was not a big fan of this card before the Dio deck was announced and the cards were revealed. I've been a big fan of it for a long, long time, and a lot of the successful lists, other than Mara's lists, have had this in the sideboard or have had it in the main deck, depending on where Dio has been through its lifetime of the deck list. It's just probably the most powerful thing you can be doing on one turn cycle, and people with the new cards have been managing to play 2 in 1 turn. So
Great.
Not many decks can block you out if you're managing to do that. So yeah.
To put that in context as well, you can't just go slam an MV on board. You need to go attack 1, attack 2, attack 3, boosting all 3 times, and then your 4th attack, minimum, will be your maximum velocity. If you are then finding a way with a card like Backup Protocol Red to be able to get the card back from your graveyard, let's say you're cranking this, you've got surplus of resources somehow with some combination, you've got maybe a couple of blues off the back of drawing from Celebrator and Processor, you're able to close the combat chain, get it back, and then play another MV. You've gone, let's say, maximum 4 into 4 into 4 into 10 into 10. You've just presented a shit ton of damage. 32 if I'm quick at maths, which is rare for me.
I think one thing to note about maximum velocity, which is the real power in the card, is that you might look at a deck like -IO or -IE or even Max and think all these attacks with boost on them, very minimal cost to just go 0 for 4, go again, 0 for 4, go again, whatever it might be. You are costing yourself cards in your deck. That is the inherent downfall with the boost mechanic, is you are quicker to run out of power than the majority of aggro decks. However, the ceiling is much higher. You don't have to work quite as hard to get that wide chain. Max V helps you push over the decks that want to punish you for burning through your deck at a faster pace by pushing much further over their blocks than previously able to. Combined with cards like Boom Grenade, I mean, you're just pushing silly damage that I don't think anyone can block.
Yeah, they can block out the first 3 attacks if they're only 0 for 3, 0 for 3, 0 for 3. But then if you have a Boom Grenade on the field and do a maximum velocity, no one's blocking 10 with a single card in their hand and some equipment up.
For reference, one of our games during testing, I got fully blocked out by Finley, and then I just played one of these at the end, and I had 2 Boom Grenades out, and he took 17. There's no way he could possibly block any, like, the amount of damage I was coming through on that turn.
It's a casual 17. That's usually people's entire turns, and that's your ender. So yeah, it certainly does feel unfair at times, but you do have to work for it. While it doesn't feel like you need to work too hard, you do have to work for it, and there is an inherent downside to boosting. You mill your own deck. If you are looking at this and thinking, oh, what does this boost keyword mean? If this is your very first time looking at Dash, amazing. Hi, great, welcome. Boost is, you may banish the top card from your deck if it is a Mechanologist card, an action, item, instant, they don't exist. But if it has the Mechanologist text, that card that you have boosted gain to go again, allowing your turn to continue. You'll find that a lot of the boost cards now do just say boost instead of explaining the text, because the mechanic has been around for, well, honestly, almost since the inception of Flesh and Blood, since the second set of Arcane Rising. So yeah, that will be why, but that is what the text of boost has. And you might find a couple of cards even still refer back to that text.
The one more thing that we haven't actually mentioned is the weapon. The weapon is very integral to the deck. The fact that you can stack up to 6 counters from playing items off the top or from hand, and then being able to shoot it for free allows you to just, at the end of chains, you can just shoot these multiple times if you've cranked an item off the top or something to get that extra damage in. A lot of decks don't have that extra damage that they can add to the end of the chain that easy and for free as well, because a lot of the cards, as I said before, the cost curve sometimes can be a bit brutal in Dash. You just might not be able, if it costs resources to actually attack with it, you probably wouldn't be able to play half the cards in a deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, so it's a big thumbs up on buying the Armory deck. Now let's look at the very first upgrade tier that you can look at grabbing. We're going to call this one the Armory tier, which is probably around about a £50 upgrade package on top of the Armory deck itself. And this will give you additional cards which you may need to be able to be more consistent and potentially even more strong taking this to an Armory event at your local LGS. Noah, top of the page, 2 brand new equipment pieces that weren't included in the Armory deck. We got Achilles Accelerator and Goliath Gauntlet. Talk us through Achilles.
Achilles is probably the best source of AB or single point of AB that you have access to. It plays into the game plan of being aggressive, so it can give you an action point if you really need it, but in those matchups where you probably don't want to have it, but it's better to have it and not need it than not have it and then need it. There might be instances where you can, for instance, pitch with the blue, block 2 arcane with the arcane barrier, and then play like a Techno Core off the top, or something else that's relevant to give you more power on your turn. But I think at a minimum, you should probably have it in your deck, and it is probably better to have, like I said, better to have and not need than not to have.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played a dash deck, or honestly, even a mech deck, because I haven't played Teklo, without Achilles Accelerator.
You haven't played much Dash.io then as well?
Well, evidently I haven't. Last time I was playing Dash.io was when she was first released, and I slapped this card in as soon as I could. Yeah, Achilles, absolute house of a card, has some decent tech into a lot of matchups, just being able to let you go one chain link further than you would have been able to originally. Remember, we were talking about Symbiosis Shot. It doesn't cost anything to be able to remove one of those counters and shoot for 2. Sometimes that final 2 damage is all you need, and all you're lacking is an action point. Crack your Achilles and be able to do it. Goliath Gauntlet, another common.
It's only really in the deck because you want to be aggressive. The arms that come in the Armory deck aren't really the best for you to be aggressive. Also, if you can threaten more breakpoints with these, it might force your opponent to overblock, and then you have an easier time later down the chain to get your damage through to get your boom grenades off, or get lethal or something like that. I know I said earlier, being able to block more allows you to be more offensive, and that is kind of the downside you're trading for not having that one block off the arms. But again, it's just an option for you.
I guess the inclusion of a card specifically for the goal of being aggressive is that in the aggro races or the race to the bottom matchups like Dash.io might play into, those sorts of decks tend to not play quite as much disruption because those cards aren't inherently super easy to play on a wide turn, right? Like Command and Conquer doesn't have Go Again, etc. So Goliath Gauntlet helps you maybe grab an extra 2 damage, help you push a boom grenade through, rather than needing the armor against another aggressive deck.
Let's talk about the deck cards that you've included in this second kind of tier here, Noah, the Armory tier. Let's start with the commons. Start with the cards which are going to be relatively easy to pick up, and yeah, just run us through what you've included. Cards like Fender Bender, Outpace, and T-Bone.
Okay, let's start with T-Bone, which is the rare. 0 cost 3, probably not the best rate. Making your opponent block with equipment though on turn 1 is very strong. You can get free like a lot of value from it, stripping armor early. The blue one is notorious for this. Just playing a 0 for 1 on the first turn is very irritating if they don't have something that can just block it for free. i.e. like Guardians find it quite irritating if they don't have the shield. You know, it can cause problems for on a later game where you've stripped 2 armor or 1 armor and then they just can't block a boom grenade and they take damage which they otherwise can't afford.
You'd much rather your opponent be blocking your 0 for 3s and 0 for 1s with armor rather than your breakpoints later on that are pushing extra damage, right? Yeah,
especially if you can catch them with no 2 blocks in hand, for instance, so that you can go boost, they have to block with a piece of armor, and then they have to block with a 3, and then they've overblocked you and they've lost value. So that can cause inefficiencies in your opponent's blocking, which can bite them later on in the game.
Let's have a look at the other ones. So Outpace, another equipment-based attack card. This one's saying that it can't be defended by equipment as a 1 for
4. This is a Majestic in a common. It's probably the most irritating attack in the deck. There have been many times where opponents just can't afford to block with the cards they have in hand, and then they just have to take damage because they just can't block this efficiently, or they need the cards in their hand. And it does come up quite often, and it's probably my favourite attack in the deck, or at least my favourite 1 for 4. It can't be understated how irritating it is for your opponent, because it really hinders their game plan. If they want to block, usually they have to overblock it because it's only a 4, and then again, if they're overblocking, they'll probably have problems blocking later down the line.
For sure.
Let's take the scenario that we spoke about earlier, right, where the deck is going wide and it's trying to connect with a boom grenade. It's super, super inefficient without a defense reaction like Sink Below or Fate Foreseen or whatever to block this card with only one card. It's almost impossible. Well, it pretty much is impossible. So you would have to commit equipment if you're trying to stop these 4 breakpoints on a Dash IO turn. This card says, no, you can't do that. So give me 2 cards or I'm going to connect with a Boom Grenade, which is very frustrating.
Absolutely.
To be on the receiving end of. Not frustrating for the player, obviously. But...
It's great. Feels great for me. It is the premier, I would say, the premier 1 cost. The first successful DO deck played Fender Bender in its slot to have a 1 cost 4, and afterwards Thomas Dowling said that he'd play Outpace instead. So it's just the best 1 for 4 that we have available.
You mentioned Fender Bender was kind of ousted by Outpace, but it is still here, being a 1 for 4. Is that simply why it's here? It is another 1 for 4?
It is a 1 for 4 with a bit of an evasion. Again, it's irritating to block with equipment, and it is a breakpoint of 4. So it can, again, it's annoying to block, which is what you'd want from your 1 for 4s.
Right, let's move on to the Majestics. The elephant in the room, the High Octane. Talk us through this card and potentially why this card got a mention in the most recent official LSS podcast as the developers having their eyes on this card.
Yeah, so unfortunately, as you say, the developers do have their eye on this card, and it is probably next up on, or the one card that'll probably get banned from this deck at some point. At the moment, it's kind of built around this card, so if you're planning on playing it Dash-IO soon, you will have to kind of bite the bullet and buy these. They are probably the strongest card in the deck, not in a vacuum, just as like a synergistic piece. It allows you to do some things, especially with the new cards, but even before the new cards, where you could boost 4 or 5 times in a turn and then swing for a free 10 at the end because of Symbiosis Shot. Or, it draws you that card that you need, that breakpoint card that you needed to swing for lethal at the end. And there are a lot of little things you can do with it that make this card powerful, but at the end of the day, action points are just really strong in this deck, and this is the easiest way to make them.
It makes you wonder whether if this card had been printed back in the day without the draw a card clause on it, whether it would have been played back then, but I think even now it would be played without it recycling itself.
Yeah, in this deck specifically, it would be probably still played without draw a card. Actually, it would be somewhat beneficial in some cases, because it would turn on Bodge on a Balance of Justice on a High Octane or a Spark of Genius turn. Yeah, this card is it's the first card on my list every time I build the deck. So
cast your mind back as well to the Armory deck itself, and I popped it up at the bottom of the screen there, Cerebellum Processor. The new equipment, the new item that just came in, which notably doesn't have Go Again to be able to draw a card. If you have excess action points, you can draw the card and still have your turn continue. It gives you that option to be able to be like, oh, well, there goes the downside of Cerebellum, and where I'm having to just arsenal this card or do some trickery with Crank to be able to gain action points. High Octane essentially gives it to you a bit on a stick, allowing you to draw up, continue your turn, go wider and wider by drawing cards not only from High Octane but from Cerebellum Processor, and then, as you correctly said, Noah, with those excess action points at the end, surely you've played enough items at that point to be able to go pistol, 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 pitching absolutely nothing and simply removing your counters.
Let's say you just have a Cerebellum and you play a High Octane, you are drawing a card or 2 cards at minimum on that turn, and that can turn a hand that otherwise functionally didn't really work into a good hand. And let's say you find another Cerebellum off the top, you can then play that and then draw another card. And
in theory, like we've sort of seen in practice, you spend one of your High Octane action points on drawing the card with Cerebellum Processor. If the card you draw with Cerebellum Processor is a card with boost, and you play it and you boost, you've just refunded the action point that you just spent to draw the card. So there's even very questionable to say whether there's even a cost to draw the card, I suppose.
Or let's say you've played an item off the top this turn, and then you see another Cerebellum on top. You can just draw the Cerebellum and play it again for free, and you just get a free counter on your weapon. And then the next turn, you have 2 Cerebellums. So if you manage to find a High Octane with that to put in your arsenal or anything, you can start chaining these like really massive turns.
You go from a deck which has a ceiling of a 5-card hand, 4 cards in an arsenal, to a deck that can have a ceiling of 7, 8 card hands if you really go for the high roll variants.
I've seen people play 19 cards in a turn. That's a fairly specific number of cards, and obviously playing High Octane and Cerebellum. And another card that we'll see later on the maybe list that you might want to consider, but
Shit.
yeah, it does allow for some really, really silly things.
Yeah, who'd have thought? God.
So look, we've said how powerful Cerebellum Processor can be. Fortunately, there's not a way for us to search it from our deck and put it into.
Yeah.
Oh no, okay, yeah, there is actually.
Yeah.
And you gain your action point back when it comes in.
And you draw a card if you boost it,
And
by
you
the
draw a
way.
card as well.
Talk us through Spark of Genius, what the first dash specialization that we are looking at.
Okay, this is the second card you put in your deck. When you go deck.
First one High Octane, second one Spark of Genius,
Second one,
third one
yeah.
Cerebellum.
Both of these cards were good in Dash IE,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, Dash IO has just looked at both of Dash's good cards and gone, I think I can do more with those actually.
Yeah.
I think I could turn these into more damage.
Spark of Genius in Dash IO is infinitely better than Spark of Genius in
Dash IE.
Dash IE.
Agreed.
100%.
I think the main contender is the fact that you have the flexibility of getting Cerebellum now, getting back up, Protocol Red or Blue if you need resources, and then getting a Boom Grenade if you just want to push damage as much as you can, or getting Technocore at the end of your turn. You could just play Spark Genius, get a Technocore, and then you just Arsenal whatever card you draw.
If you
and
are
then you set up like a really strong turn.
If you are new to Flesh and Blood, you might look at this card and be slightly confused about the cost, as it says XX. X is not a number. Usually they say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, hell, if playing Guardian, sometimes 9. But the text says, search your deck for a Mechalogist item card with cost X, put that into the arena, then shuffle your deck. If you boosted this turn, draw a card. You are choosing the cost of X, you then have to pay that twice. If you choose a 1 cost item from your deck you want to put into the arena, you need to pay 1 and 1. You need to pay 2. If you choose, say, a 0 cost item, you pay 0 twice, and that's straight maths at 0.
That'd be pretty good, right? 0 cost items.
Yeah, that'd be pretty good. Let me pop up Cerebellum Processor again at the bottom of your screen, and let me just point something out. Yeah, that says 0. Move that away very promptly before anyone gets any ideas. You can put an item into play with Crank, like Cerebellum Processor, like Boom Grenade. Regain your action point by cranking it. Then you draw a card because you boosted this turn. Say this is the second thing you're doing. You've gained your action point back. You've drawn a card. You've got something else out on the field. Cool, I'm just going to keep going. And then you continue your turn. Sparky Genius is crazy. And the more items we're getting, the more busted this card gets.
Being able to tutor basically anything you need in a situation really makes this card very, very flexible and powerful. Like if you get it on the first turn of the game, you can either go get Technocore, or if you have it in your list, you can go get Technopanda, which is down there at the bottom of this deck list. You can just fetch this on the first turn, and basically that's you've basically used 1 card to get an extra 6 damage of Technopanda and 2 damage of your Symbiosis shot.
Yeah.
So you're cooking with gas from turn 0.
Let's have a look at some of those other Majestic options. We talked about Technopounder and you saying it's worth about 6 value. Give us a rundown of what this item does now.
So, if you're a fan of Dash IE, you've probably seen this before. Kyle, you're probably intimately familiar with this. You've played this a few times.
Fucking love this card.
Yeah, it's great. Basically, it just sits in play. Whenever you boost, it gives +2 to whatever attack you've played. This notably is very, very strong. It's just 3 damage on the front loads in the first 3 turns or first 3 attacks of the game. You do want them to really be on, for instance, like a 0 for 5 or a 2 or something, because then it turns into breakpoints. So that effect, if you just play it on a 0 for 4 or 1 for 4, they'll just block with 2. Your opponent will just block with 2 cards, and you kind of lost the value there. But it's still very, very powerful. You can open the game, and open the game with it is very strong. And there are other cards that do kind of combo with it that are in a maybe board later on. Notably,
with this card, unlike some of the new items, does not have the crank keyword though. So if you do get this into play with Spark of Genius without excess action points, it will end your turn. And of course, it costing 2. As you mentioned with Spark of Genius, you having to pay the cost of the item twice. It would cost 4 resources for you to be able to do this. But if we're on a turn 0 situation where you just want to potentially set up and have a decent arsenal along with a very strong board state, getting a Techno Pounder with a Spark of Genius straight away is an incredibly strong way of setting up. It essentially flags your opponent that you need to kill me in 3 turns or I'm going to kill you.
We're gonna be pumping out damage early and often with this card.
Hell yeah. Callum, I see you grimacing a little bit when we're talking about this one.
I think, like you guys have said, in more traditionally played in Dash IE, because she gets to pick the item that she starts the game with on board.
Yep.
When she's going for that super hyper aggressive aggro plan, this card is one of the best options to start the game with. And from the perspective of someone trying to block that deck, I cannot wait for this card to end. And cannot wait for this card to have no counters left on it. If I survive the initial pounding, if you will, I tend to feel a little bit better about the game. But yeah, this is a scary card.
Yeah. No, there's only one of them that you've listed here. Is there a specific reason why you've only included one here, or?
It's something I've seen in quite a few decks. Notably, probably I've forgotten his first name, but his surname's Yap. He played at the Pro Tour. He was playing it as a one-off. I assume to just spike it on the first turn. You just put it in turns where you go first, and you hopefully either draw it or spark Genius, and then you just start the game like Dash IE, or well, just down 2 cards in your deck. But the power that you get from it in this deck is probably worth it. One more thing is, there is an opportunity cost of running it because it is a blue.
Yep.
It doesn't attack. It does cost 2, and it doesn't crank. So there is quite a decent opportunity cost to having them in your deck. And obviously you only want so many blues because you want to be as aggressive as you possibly can be. So we are singing its praises, but you don't want to have too many in your deck unless you have a way of getting them out of your deck, or you're playing around playing them. So one is preferable to more than that unless you have other cards in your deck.
We are seeing 3 other blue items, those being another Dash spec of Teklo Core.
Yeah, this is the 3rd item you put in your deck. The 3rd card you get put in the deck. It's just incredibly strong. Anyone that's played Dash IE knows free resources is just really, really strong, and the deck kind of functions like goes from 0 to 60, if you will. Once you have one of
if
you have one of these out, it just turbocharges your turn because you don't really need to worry as much about resources, and most of the time you have another blue. So if you have this out and you see an item on top and you're playing like a 1 for 4, you boost, you see an item on top, you get it for free, and effectively you've played 2 cards for nothing and you haven't had to pitch anything. And if it's for instance backup protocol red, then and you have a blue in hand, you can then crack the backup protocol blue red, and then get an item from your graveyard and you get another attack.
The benefit of playing this off the top of the deck as well is the fact that when you play items off the top of your deck with Dash IO's ability, they're instants. They don't cost they aren't an action at that point. They don't use one of your action points. While you aren't able to gain a free action point by cranking, as the fact that Teklo Core doesn't have crank, it's just sitting there basically menacingly until the next turn, waiting for essentially you to draw up and then throw the house at your opponent with your 2-3 resources. If we are thinking of like not even item combinations and that sort of stuff, just like purely what you can do with those 2 resources, you can go zip hit for 5, zip hit for 5. You've just chucked 10 damage at your opponent for free without pitching a card in your hand, and still have 2 cards and potentially an arsenal sitting ready to go. Yeah. Most turns where you're looking to activate a maximum velocity start with a Teklo Core.
I was just going to say, like we've said previously about the sacrifice or the downside of the boost mechanic being that you burn through your deck quickly, it's really, really key to be able to set up these big 5-card hands, these big turns with items on board to push that damage through the blocking deck, so you don't end up in a situation where you're running out of cards in deck, or you're drawing hands full of cards you've pitched all game.
Yeah.
And Teklo Core is another one of those really, really powerful pieces to make a 5-card hand actually feel more like a 6-card hand.
Sure.
It's a race against your own deck because you're burning through it at a rapid pace, but you have the numbers that can push enough damage to kill your opponent.
Yeah.
So having access to turn those inefficient hands like on one turn into something that can, do something on the next one is invaluable.
The Armory deck only includes 2 of these, so we've slid in the 3rd and final maximum velocity. This may not come into every single one of your matchups. Sometimes 3 maximum velocities is too many. Sometimes you aren't afforded the opportunity to be able to go as wide and then end with an MV as you would like. but include the more chance of hitting it. Might as well at that point. It's a really good popper as well into the illusion.
Yeah. more damage density in the deck as well. If, like Callum said, you are burning cards off the top, so having access to these cards still in your deck at some point means you just have access to more bigger turns.
A lot of the games that you play against the dashes, whenever you see the maximum velocities boosted off the top, you feel pretty good about your chances of winning the game. However, include more than one or two of them, and that doesn't feel quite so bad for the dash player, I guess.
For sure. Right. You've upgraded your Armory deck. You've moved to the Armory tier. You've cracked an extra 50 quid into it, and now you're smashing people at a local level. Maybe you want to go to the town over. Maybe you want to go to the city over and win a pro quest and qualify yourself for the pro tour. You want to drop a little bit more money. Here's the £100 upgrade. Now, it might not seem like a lot, but there's some very important cards here. Primarily equipment. Noah, talk to us about adaptive plating.
This card looks a little bit innocuous at the start because it only blocks 1 and has Blade Break, but it is very, very strong. Depending on if you have items in play, which with the new Cerebellum, once you've activated it on its final turn, it just sits there. So it's basically just a free way of being able to get 3 block. Any item that you have on your turn, let's say you're playing against like a particularly defensive deck, you haven't been able to hit a boom grenade on that turn. You just block with this, and you basically sack the boom grenade that was going to die anyway for an additional 2 block. I would say very, very integral to the deck. You might even want 2. Some people are playing 2. A guy that I talk to quite a lot, Vlasta, plays 2 in his deck in the arms and legs, and I know that Mara Faris also plays this in the legs because sometimes you just don't need the AB. So what's better than a 0 block, 3 block? So
hold up, no, real quick. You're saying that you can play this card in multiple positions. What do you mean?
That comes down to the keyword modular, Kyle.
For that one, didn't I?
You really, really did. Basically, it allows you to play in any equipment zones. At the start of the game, you just pick where it goes. But you can't play another equipment in that slot. You have to be playing adaptive plating, but it could go anywhere. So you can play it in the head, you can play it in the chest. It's more played in the arms and legs than anywhere else. But yeah, it's again very flexible with what you can do with it, and in some matchups it does go in different places.
I am going to break some people's hearts at home, and you're thinking, oh my god, I've got 4 equipment zones. I can have 4 adaptive platings. Unfortunately, it is still a card with the same name. You can still only run 3 of them in your deck. So you can have all 3. You have your head, your arms, your legs, all adaptive platings if you really wanted to. We wouldn't recommend it, but it is legally possible in Fab.
Yes.
If you really want to spend 150 quid on some okay blocking piece of equipment.
I think like Noah sort of mentioned before, the tendency to have your opponent try and disrupt you as an aggressive deck is quite common and can be quite frustrating as the aggressive deck trying to set up these big hands to push damage through. The biggest offenders for these disruptive cards are cards like Command and Conquer, Erase Face, Weakest Link. These are 2 for 6s. And this is a 1 equipment piece that covers half of that entire attack in 1 if you have an item on board. So putting your adaptive plating, sacking a used up item and putting 1 3 block, or maybe even your chest and your boots in front of it, makes for very, very efficient evasion of these disruptive effects.
And with the new boots, notably, you can block with your chest, the boots, and this. If you break an item, that's 0 card, full block of a CNC or any disruptive effect, not having to use your helmet, which makes this very, very strong.
Is creeping up in price though, of course, as this deck releases. Let's talk about another piece of equipment, an absolute icon for Mechalologist players, and probably one of the oldest legendaries available, releasing in Arcane Rising. This is Teklo Foundry Heart. Noah, why is this card so good?
It kind of ties into the whole game plan of Dash.io. Obviously, it's a 2-block Battle 1 chest that doesn't go away, so it just stays there the entire game, which is obviously quite strong. So you get 3 points of value at least from this if you don't do anything with it. But the main thing is that 1, you can use in combination with Dash.io's ability, you can look at the top card, and if you don't want to see that card, or you can use it to try and dig for more items. If you haven't found one yet on your turn, you can just activate this for 1, flip 2 cards off the deck, and you get an extra look at an item possibly on the top of your deck. And the way that a lot of decks are set up, you have 15 items. So if you boost or look at 4 cards on top of your deck, you're statistically likely to find at least 1. You might find more, but this helps you dig to those items. And again, when you do activate this ability, you do get more resources. So in those aggressive matchups, you're going to be activating this, hopefully finding items off the top, using those resources to just play more cards, play more items off the top, and you can just keep churning through your deck with it. The downside is that it's not as good into aggressive matchups. You really do not want to be banishing the top 2 cards of your deck more than like once or twice in a game.
Yeah.
Because it can just cost you, because you can't really control like what you're boosting away with it. You can see the first card, can't see the second one, so that control that you have from looking at the top of your deck goes away with this card. But the trade-off is, the ability to gain more resources and look at more cards on the top of your deck.
The sort of trend we've seen with a lot of the mech card design is that where other decks would pay the price for their cards with resources in hand, cards that they play on their turn, etc., the mechs get to cheat around that a little bit by saying, I'll use my deck instead. I'll use my deck as my resource and benefit off that. Like you've said, it can be a bit scary into the defensive matchups where your deck is a more valuable resource than it might be in the aggressive matchups where the games are much shorter. But this card can, like you say, help you get the extra free resources you need to push a max V, to push an extra 1 for 4, to play an item off the top, etc. So yeah, pretty powerful card. And look, there's a reason they don't print 2 battle-worn equipment anymore.
Yeah, that is a bygone era. We get the Guardwell now, or maybe even Temper. And quite cheap now as well. This card has had multiple reprints, even in Evo, Bright Lights. I think this card sits around the sub £20 mark. We would still recommend grabbing it kind of when you move towards that more expensive tier of being comfortable to drop a fair chunk of money on additional things. But if you did want to skip ahead and grab a Foundry Heart, you won't be bitten in the arse by it.
Yeah, I would say this is probably the first card out of all of these that I would pick.
Final piece of equipment here in the Armory, in the ProQuest tier, being Visitronic Model 1.
That's an I there, mate.
Model I. Sure, fine. It's Model I.
You said this in the Dash Blitz deck. You said Model 1, and I didn't correct you, but I'm doing it this time.
Okay, it is an I. Fine. You will look at this card, and you will look at the action, and you'll try and think, destroy Visitronic Model I. Whenever you boost this, okay, that doesn't seem very good, and that's because it's not. This ability, do not try and make good. It will never work. It is not here for that reason. Noah, why is this card here?
Clip that for the day.
Yeah, like someone's gonna build like a massive combo deck now.
It won't work, bro. I'm telling you, it doesn't exist.
Okay. We'll see. This is the Kano tax. You kind of have to play this card. It gives you the most game into Kano if you see it. It's just a 1-card sideboard for Kano. You don't really want to dedicate any more.
No.
Than that. You could possibly play it in other matchups now, like a Cilio, if you feel like that Arcane is disrupting you too much. But really, it's just for maybe Verdance, but I haven't found in the matchup that you need it particularly.
Yeah.
So I just think it is just the Kano tax.
This, alongside Achilles Accelerator that we showed previously, it gives you effectively natural AB3. Allowing you to pitch a blue and mitigate 3 arcane damage, which is incredibly relevant into Kano when he's trying to hit you with these big, what's it called, like Aether Flares and cards that amp the rest of your arcane. Aether Wildfire being one as well, yeah. Looking to amp the rest of the arcane damage that you're doing across the rest of the turn. Shutting those down as soon as possible by pitching a blue into them. Incredibly important. So, you put in a cheap headpiece that has AB2.
Not every class has access to a single equipment piece that has Arcane Barrier 2 on it.
No.
So the cost of playing Arcane Barrier 3 in a lot of classes is sacrificing 3 equipment slots. However, Mech is afforded the luxury of only playing 2 Arcane Barrier equipment slots, and I mean the boots are pretty good anyway. So you have been, Mechs have been playing Achilles Accelerator for a long time anyway. Tying that in with Visitronic basically means that you get to keep more of your offensive leaning equipment, which is really good because that means you stay aggressive against the decks like Wizards that don't want you to be aggressive against them.
Absolutely.
I would say it's not necessary that you need it at an armory, but again, if you come up against the Kano and you don't have it, you'll regret it. And I have had it at ProQuest where I didn't pack it because I was like, no one's going to play Kano, and I play it round 1, and yeah, never left my deck ever since.
You always have to pay the Kano tax.
Absolutely. You just got to do it. Put those 2 cards in. We've talked about the fact that as an aggressive deck, Dash.io can be, like many other aggressive decks, very susceptible to disruption. And because you're an aggressive deck, you don't get access to disruption. Right? Right, Noah? What the bloody hell's this?
But you do. In some matchups, you do. Like, this card is extremely strong.
Give us a rundown. What does it do?
When you had to pick the wordiest card.
Get your specs on, mate. Come on.
When this attacks a hero, they reveal X cards from their hand, where X is the number of times you've boosted this combat chain. Choose an action card, with block less than or equal to X, then add this to the chain link as a defending card boost. Basically, what it means is if you play 3 boost cards, you can look at your opponent's hand and pick. They pick 3 cards they have in hand if they haven't blocked, and you can choose any 3 block action from their hand and put it onto the chain link defending. So you can really use this to mess up people's turns by taking the blue or taking their best attack, and then they don't really do anything on their next turn. It's really good into aggressive matchups because you can just go, you boost 3 times because they're not blocking, and then you just take their best card in their hand. So and then you make their attacks less efficient. You take a good attack or something. It helps you win the race.
I'm kind of happy to have your opponent make your opponent block for 3 on this card if it means the card that they're blocking 3 with was going to get more value offensively. So let's take a card like a very relevant card at the moment, Mordred Tide. If I'm playing Viserai and I'm saying no blocks to my Dash.io opponent, and the third card they attack with is Pulse Wave Harpoon, and I reveal a Mordred Tide, guess what? I now no longer have a Mordred Tide turn, which is more valuable for Dash.io than it would have been the other way around.
You've played 3 boost cards before this and they've eaten all the damage because they're looking to return something massive, and then your 4th card is a boosted Pulse Wave Harpoon. They only have 4 cards in their hand. They have to reveal all 4 cards, and then you go, cool, this one card that you were holding on, like let's say like a CNC or a Race Face, like you were going to end your turn, or something massive that was really going to hamper me. Well, I'm just going to block with that, actually, and then you're not going to get to do that. And then they're going to start rethinking their entire turn. It's like, oh my god, like I didn't block all of this, so I could play this card out and really like regain some tempo. And you've just gone, nah, actually, let's dictate the pace a bit. It's me who's going to be deciding this one here.
I take your felling of the crown. I take your plow under. Like you're no longer stopping me from what I wanted.
Great.
And notably, again, like I said earlier, you will be breaking the chain in Dash.io if you're using Teklo Foundry Heart and Cerebellum. So the value you can get from this is contextual to how many times you can boost without breaking the combat chain.
Yes, very important. This is not like maximum velocity that says you've boosted 3 times this turn. You must boost the X amount this combat chain. That means not closing it. That means not doing something that isn't an attack. You simply have to just keep going. Or you open with a Pulse Wave Harpoon for a 1/4 and they go, cool, reveal it. Card doesn't block for 1, so guess what? You don't get to put it on the combat chain. Really strong card, but make sure you're using it at the right time. Chainlink 3 or above. That's basically the sweet spot for Pulse Wave.
Yeah, contextually really strong.
Absolutely.
I think we've, like you said, this upgrade tier, similarly to a couple of the ones in the Bolton Armory deck, seems like it's not very many cards, and a lot of people may be put off by spending a lot of money on fewer cards. And yeah, 100 quid for 6 cards is not always the best value, but what these cards do for the deck, specifically the equipment for you have to remember the equipment starts the game in play. You're always going to get use out of these cards. These aren't cards that you might not see as you play the game. These cards start on the board. Pulse Wave Harpoon, super powerful attack, one of the most powerful boost cards in the deck. I think very, very worthy value for money that you get with only 6 cards.
Absolutely it is. You've cracked out at your first pro quest. You've done well. Maybe you haven't taken home the Pro Tour invite, But local events coming up. What's that? Oh my God, it's Pro Tour London. They've got a calling. You're going to invest some money, go with your friends to London Excel, and you want to play the very best that DO can offer. And that is what this tier provides. Welcome to the calling/pro tier. You're going to be dumping a fair bit of money here, but if you're travelling potentially out of country to come over to Old Blighty and entering a 70, 75, maybe £80 entry event, I think committing £200 up front for your deck to make sure it's as strong as it could be is very, very important. And we include more equipment here, Noah. Talk us through Balance of Justice, Crown of Providence, and Stonewall Gauntlet.
Okay. First card that I pick out of all of these, the most important cop. Straight away, Crown of Providence. Like we said earlier with CNCs, it just gets the first one out the way. It just gives you a 5-card hand into a CNC after a CNC turn, which is very, very powerful. Like, you can play this into every matchup that you can play Balance of Justice, and you'd still be fine. But it's just there's a few specific matchups that Balance of Justice I think is better in. But Crown of Providence is bar none probably the best helm you can get in the game, at least for Dash.io.
I think, like you say, being a synergy deck in that you need a certain amount of resource cards, you need good attacks, you maybe even want to find an item on the top, you maybe want to find a max fee or something like that. Being able to cycle certain cards out your hand or out of your arsenal is really important. And one major benefit that Dash.io gets for playing Crown of Providence is you get to see the bloody card you're going to draw.
Yep.
That's broken.
Yeah.
Actually, I do want this card that's on top of my deck, and I don't want my Arsenal card. Let me just...
let me just trade this yellow boom grenade that I've Arsenal to, and I'll just trade that for the high octane on top. Yeah, I think...
Would you take that deal? I'd take that deal.
I'll take that deal.
Yeah. I think like as someone who plays against Dash.io and plays Command and Conquers and Disruptive Effects, and there's decks playing cards like Leave No Witnesses and stuff like that, when you play against an opponent playing Crown of Providence, you almost just don't want to play the first Command and Conquer that you draw. You have to, because you have to get the Crown of Providence out of the way. But sometimes you're just like, oh, my Command and Conquer that I spent 150 quid for a placeholder is not doing anything.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
The cards, the new information you get from Dash.io, like no other deck can abuse COP like it. So this is the first card that I would.
Hey! I was playing Vincent with Blood Tribute in, mate, and that.
Sorry.
That.
Oh my bad.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, no, it's not quite as good as
Bros just said I'm playing the Cope hero with the Cope card, and I'm telling you that is better.
Put some respect on the name.
Before we jump into Balance of Justice, one thing I do want to mention here as well is you'll notice that all 3 pieces of these equipment are generic, meaning that your investment here is an investment. You are not buying these cards as equipment pieces purely to run in Dash.io. These are completely flexible for you to be able to run in other decks for you to be able to flex into. You then don't have to dump the £70, the £80, the £30 of Providence, Justice, and Gauntlet up front again. Once it's done, it's done. And also, £200 for these 3 is pretty damn good, considering I know someone who paid about £200 for one of these. Callum, how you doing, mate? You good?
Yeah, look, it was cold fall, all right.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's not as bad as paying 200 for Arcanite Skull Cap back in the day.
Yeah, we don't talk about that
Our
one.
investment was not a good one.
Let's talk about a headpiece that has very promptly replaced Arcanite Skull Cap, Balance of Justice, the newest one here.
Yeah. This going forward probably will be the best item in the mirror. And you'll probably like allowing yourself to draw an extra card just means you can be just as aggressive. Dio's going to be drawing lots of cards, so allowing yourself to also draw cards into your aggressive turns works really well. A bit of a downside is that you can see if there's an item on top. A lot of the time you don't really want to have the item on top. Like you don't really want to have that card in hand unless it's a blue that's funding your turn. You see like a I don't even know, like a backup protocol red, and you don't really want to be drawing that because I guess it is still a free card, but you want something better really. But at least you know what's coming, like when you draw with it, and it has utility into other matchups like brutes, and basically it's
Aurora,
basically just the mirror. Oh, and
Aurora, she plays Snatch, she plays East Strikes, plays CLV. That bitch be drawing. I'm telling you that from experience. Yeah,
She
really.
also runs CNC, just saying.
Yeah.
No, she doesn't.
What I'll say is this Balance of Justice has lost some value since LSS banned a lot of the draw power cards in the game. However, like, if they've banned the draw power cards in the game to print draw power cards in class for heroes such as Dash.io, who knows what we'll get down the line for other aggressive classes.
Absolutely.
Balance of Justice is going to always be a really, really useful tech equipment piece that you could use depending on what decks are good.
I would say you'd want Bodge going forward. Like you say, it is just an investment. I would say it's probably the least necessary out of the three. I think I would say if you can't afford it or you don't really want to spend the money on it, you can just get away with Cop in most of the matchups that you play.
For people who might be a bit confused, Crown of Providence, COP, Cop. No, you're fine. Balance of Justice, BOJ, Bodge. Notably, we aren't calling Stonewall Gauntlet SG, but give us a rundown of Stonewall Gauntlet, Noah. Why would you run this over some of the other equipment that you've highlighted, considering it's only Blade Break Run?
Okay, so this comes in specific matchups that you otherwise might not run it in. So, for instance, you could play this in Azalea, so you run this in the arms, and then you play Adaptive Plating in the boots, and then you basically have you can turn off some of Azalea's really good turn. Like I played in the Pro Quest yesterday, I turned off a Bolton shot, forcing my opponent to use his snaps on that turn. But at the moment, it's just a solid piece of armor that you will get use out of. I would think it is just useful to pick up.
Worth picking one up. I think what's a real bit of luxury that Dash.io has got is not having to pay the tunic tax that we saw in the Bolton upgrade path. And I think being able to spend your money on these cards over tunic, which is still pretty expensive, is really nice. Eventually, when you branch out into other decks, maybe you'll pick up a tunic for those decks, but the compounded price of all of these generic equipment pieces can be pretty high. Dash.io being one that doesn't need all of them is pretty nice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was definitely one of the reasons that I picked up Dash quite early as well. Even when Foundry Heart was more expensive than it currently exists now, like I said, it's sitting around that £15-20 mark. I remember it being £80, and I was happy to pick one of those up then, because Final Spring Tunic was sitting at 140, 170, 200, depending on what variant you got. So it almost was the budget option deck. Now, of course, that has changed quite a bit, but also a lot of these legendaries, even the generic variety, have dropped in price with sheerly the amount of products that is now being opened, and the fact that cards like Crown of Providence have already been reprinted. We saw a non-foil version of this one be printed in Industrial Dawn, whereas the Rainbow Foil and the Coal Foil variants were printed in Uprising. Yes, I couldn't remember if it was Dynasty or Uprising, but Uprising it was. Anyway, we move on from equipment, we move on to our deck cards. Heist, Noah, a 2 for 5. Doesn't seem great on paper, missing that 2 for 6 value that we usually see on cards like CNC and kind of the standard rate, but of course go again from boost. Is this effect good enough to include?
This is a bit of I would say I'm not gonna say it's contentious, but people don't like playing too many of this card. I think this card is very good. It forces blocks in a lot of situations because the value you can get from it, if you get a red boom grenade out of your own arsenal, no, your own banished zone, it's just free extra damage, like the free 6 damage on your next turn if they're not going to block, or if you can get damage through. 2 for 5 is not the worst rate in the world. There are obviously better cards that you could, if you wanted just pure rate, you could play those, but there are matchups where this is extremely good, notably aggro matchups where you're just boosting. If you hit an item off the top that you can't play, you can get it back with this and you get free value.
I suppose one thing that might not be apparent when reading the card first off is that every time an item enters the arena as Dash.io with Symbiosis Shot, that's a counter on Symbiosis Shot, right?
Indeed.
That's another 2 damage when you get to shoot with that Symbiosis Shot, and another action point if the item has crank. So it's not just the opportunity of cost of your opponent letting you have just another item. It's actually an item plus an action point +2 damage on the pistol. It's really, really good if this card connects.
We've been singing the praises of the 0 cost and 1 cost items as well, and sometimes it does hurt you a little bit as a Dash player when you go, well, I have to continue pushing this turn and there is an item on top of my deck that I don't want to get rid of, but ta-ta for now as you boost it away. And then you go, actually heist, and then you go, cool, this hits, I get a Cerebellum Processor back and crank it and then draw a card, and it's like, oh crap, okay, this turn has spun out of control a little bit.
Yeah, I play this as the last attack on the chain. You can't block it, it hits. I play a Cerebellum or a Boom Grenade or something like Teklo from the banished, and it's just free value. Most notably, also with the strength of this deck, strength of Dio moving forward, it's any banished zone. So you could technically nick your opponent from their banished zone if they've hit them.
I had no idea that was a thing.
That's really funny. Oh shit.
So it's just something to bear in mind moving forward. Most of the time, I've not really played too many mirrors, but this card will be good in the mirror going forward, but it's already good in my opinion.
Holy guys, this card's being played quite a bit recently as well. You could get a free healing pot, Noah. You can get a healing pot.
If they got it in their banished zone.
I don't know how they're getting into their banished zone, but we worry about that later.
That's crazy. I didn't know this card was like to hit your opponent's banished zone as well.
Yeah,
fair enough. The amount of
I'm stilted.
The amount of forced interaction that is sort of coming into these aggro decks now. I mean, we've just seen Rosetta Printed giving Runeblades cards like Snuff Out and Come to Temptation. Dio's getting cards like Dio has already had cards like Heist and Pulse Wave Harpoon. Boom Grenade is like this semi-permanent must block sort of effect. I think it's going to start being really, really difficult to block your opponent when you're playing these aggro mirrors.
You've definitely got to choose the right moment, right? You can't just block anything willy-nilly because there are plenty of cards out there now that are must blocks. And now that Noah's released that bit of information from any banished zone, if you are in a mirror, if you're playing Dash.io and hell, even Dash.ie, look after your equipment, ladies and gents, because these items are gonna be stolen by your opponent.
Great card.
Hell
yeah. Most block card in the deck, probably.
Yeah, honestly, I'd like to see the stats of that. I believe 100%. It. We're talking 2 for 5s here, and we've got Twin Drive. Another 2 for 5 that simply reads Boost and Boost. Why is this card good?
The old Control-C, Control-V buttons on the LSS's keyboard got some good use the day they designed this one.
Damn right it did. At least I spelled it all right this time. Noah, why is Twin Drive good?
Again, the deck, specifically Dio, now that you have access to Cerebellum and other things, just having a card that can go boost, and then let's say you play a 0-60 from hand, Teklo Foundry Heart, because you've played a blue to Twin Drive, you get another 2 resources. You've basically had like a 4-card max V turn. So
you pitch 1 blue, you've played 2 cards, and then you play an MV. So that's 5.
Not on the same game.
Of course. Well, how dare I assume it's on the same combat chain? So we paid 2 for the Twin Drive. We paid nothing for the 0 for 60 red. So you've come in for 9 already. And then you go Foundry Heart, gain 2 resources, MV for 10. You've done 19 damage on 4 cards. Pitching 1 of them.
But that's better than a Blood Rush Claw Pack Hunt.
Real. Very real.
I don't remember the last time you guys saw one of those, but
no.
I can't remember the last time I played against a brute, honestly, mate. This set's done wonders for him.
More noticeably, it does other things other than play max V. With your high octane, it basically turbocharges your high octane turns to you can make smaller hands with high octane still get good gun equity you can just maximize the amount of boost you get off an action points from a smaller hand.
This bad boy gets so much more gun equity in it, I'm telling you. Slap side of car.
It's also really good with Pulse Wave Harpoon because you could have you can pitch a blue, Twin Drive twice. If let's say you've only got those 2 cards to attack with, you want to Arsenal something, you can go Twin Drive boost twice, Pulse Wave Harpoon boost, and then you can look at their card, look at your opponent's hand, and then you can take one. So it does synergize quite well with a lot like decent number of cards in the deck, but sometimes it is just a 2 for 5 go again
with a single
text.
boost bottom text.
Yeah, it's a role player, but sometimes it's not as amazing as you would otherwise want.
It also has a small amount of synergy with the new Dash.io chess piece, right?
Yeah, it does. It with the new chess piece, notably that chess piece really good into fatigue. Twin Drive notably not, but because you're boosting 2 cards away with Twin Drive. But basically, with that new card, it pays for itself. So you can just Twin Drive for effectively free. You crack that one, pay 2, and you can just keep rolling after that. That heavy industry power plant really does help. In it's a once per game use, but if you can get a real good use out of it with like a Twin Drive and on a max V turn, then you're in a really good spot.
It's following that similar sort of pattern that we've seen in these Armory decks with cards like Savage Sash and Solar Plexus in the Bolton Armory deck, where you get these really once per game power turn effects. And should you be in a matchup where, like Noah says, maybe a fatigue sort of deck where you forego the cost on deck in the Foundry Heart, and you go for this card that is, this chess piece that is really good at pushing over. I think really good addition by LSS. The real downside, I suppose, of what we're seeing in this Calling / Pro Tour tier is, like you said, the cost. I think Twin Drives themselves for a playset are going to set you back a few quid. Unfortunately, only having been printed in Bright Lights I think people were kind of hoping for a reprint of this card in this Armory deck, but you got some max Vs and some other bits. But maybe a card that's going to creep up in price again after the Dash.io deck comes out, like a lot of these cards. So look, the prices that we've kind of put on these versions of the deck are subject to change, obviously, as prices will change with any trading card game. But you can treat these tiers more so as a order in which you should buy cards, to allow yourself sort of like the biggest jumps in quality as you choose to spend more money. But look, these cards, hopefully a few more cards are going to get reprinted in the future, like Twin Drive and Heist. I'm sure we'll get a non-foil print of Balance of Justice shortly. But yeah, they're worth the money. Cards are really powerful, and like, as we've mentioned a couple of times throughout the video, we are expecting Dash.io to be really powerful after this Armory deck comes out. She's already on the cusp of being really good at the moment. Aggro decks stay winning, I guess.
Absolutely.
I would say Twin Drive, not necessarily 100% necessary. You could probably pick these up last depending on the build that you decide on. Let's say you're not really wanting to play Max V, you could just not get Twin Drive and just play like a really efficient aggro deck. If you want to look at a deck that played like that, look up Mara Faris's list from the pre-Armory deck era.
We'll link it below.
Basically you're just playing efficient attacks with Boom Grenades off the top, and the pressure you can pile on is very consistent.
One other thing that we have included on this page, as we scroll down ever so slightly, are 2 more Tetlo Pounders if you do want to round them out. We've already talked about the downside of flooding your deck with this card, but if you do want to finally get them and increase it to a 3 of in your deck, then the options here. 35 maybe cards. We are not going to talk about these. These are tech cards similar to what we had with Bolton, where there are many different metas that are in our future for sure, and individual cards here may play into them. Have a look through, see if any of them tickle your fancy, and if they do, grab them and filter them in whenever you see fit. Other than that though, that was the Dash.io Armory deck upgrade tier. We've already talked about it throughout this video, but Dash.io in particular has the potential to be the best deck in the format once this set releases, once the Armory deck itself releases, which is a crazy thing to say. It's not an entire set of support she's getting 2 or 3 cards, and so it clearly shows she's been on the cusp for a while. Brian Gottlieb and James White in the most recent LSS Dev Talk video talked about how this deck is on, like, they are watching like a hawk. It's through a sniper's lens right now. They're going to let it play as it is right now for Worlds, and then be very, very quick to pull the trigger if they see this deck getting out of hand. Primarily with cards like High Octane, and that was one of the cards that they called out. It is quite cheap. We still highly recommend you pick it up, as the deck does do some very silly things with it, and you will be hampered without it. If you are watching this and High Octane is gone and banned and you're watching it post-Worlds, then please check out February, which we will have linked below, not only for our lists, but in general, to have a look at some of the more recent lists that have been performing well and seeing how they've adjusted to the meta post-High Octane leaving. Because it is a world that we may have to live in very, very soon. However, I still feel that Dash.io is going to be a premium aggro deck, even sub that card. So you are not wasting your money getting into this.
100%. And one thing to note is that with the Living Legend system, the way it is, Dash.IE, one of the other aggressive mechanologist decks, is her days are numbered in Classic Constructed, and
it's very close.
It's only a matter of time before Dash.io is the only Dash in Classic Constructed to be able to play cards like Teklo Core and Spark of Genius. So there's a bright future for Dash.io, especially with the support from this Armory deck. So yeah, look forward to see what people do with it.
For sure. Noah, thank you so much for putting this together, dude. Really appreciate it. You put in a lot of work playing kind of all different flavors of Dashes over what feels like the last year and a bit, and transitioning now over to Dash.io. Are there any closing thoughts you wanted to kind of round this video out with?
I just wanted to say it was probably my personal favourite deck in Fab so far. It's probably the most interesting. It is taking a different pathway now that Tome of Faendor is gone. You guys know my personal love for that card. RIP, as you said before. But the deck is looking very strong with this, and I think it could survive a High Octane ban. It still puts out lots of pressure, very aggressive, and you can still have big turns even without High Octane. So I don't think it's necessarily worth being scared of any ban.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say thank you to a guy called Vlaster that I know on the Discord. He looked through the deck list as well and agreed with me with a lot of the stuff that I put in the decks. And thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. More than welcome anytime.
I can't believe you said that Dash.io was your favourite deck in Fab when we both played Chain, man. What the fuck?
No, like genuinely, the Dash.io is probably the most interesting play experience I've had. Chain is very, very fun and very powerful, but I would say there's a lot more going on for me is in Dash.io.
There's a lot more thought, you actually mean, instead of just going, I banished the top 5 cards on my deck and I play Go Against.
I'm not having any chain slander in this video here. That's the only reason I'm in this video, is to make sure the people aren't shit talking Chain, okay?
Fair enough. Well, guys, that is it. Make sure you check out down below the links to the full decks, which include actually what the deck will look like. I know we've broken it down to what cards you need to buy at these upgrade tiers, but the full decks will be below. We might even twist Noah's arm for a couple of sideboard guides if he is so inclined.
You only need 2. Stack, aggro. There you go.
Fuck's sake. Right, if you want to be as general like Noah, play this deck. Thank you very much for watching, guys. We've been CupofTCG. We'll catch you very, very soon. Peace.